Todo comienza con una pregunta. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué tengo que caminar si puedo montar a caballo? ¿Por qué ir en caballo si puedo ir en tren? ¿Por qué viajar en tren si puedo volar? Y si puedo volar, ¿por qué quedarme en la tierra? La humanidad avanza cuando alguno de nosotros pregunta, piensa, cuestiona o busca una nueva solución. Cuando nos rehusamos a aceptar la respuesta usual y sin importar el que dirán gritamos, ¿por qué? No son las respuestas las que nos hacen crecer, sino las preguntas. Pregúntate, ¿por qué el mundo cambió cuando alguien como tú se preguntó, ¿por qué?
Today's conversation is about how to build a country from scratch in the 21st century. To help us to learn about the experience of Liberland, located between Croatia and Serbia, and proclaimed in 2015, we have with us the president of that free republic, President Vid Jedlička. Welcome, Mr. President.
It's great to be here, Luis, after the 4 years again. Let me start this presentation by a quote by Mark Skousen. The taxation is the price we pay for failing to build a civilized society. We have decided at some point in 2013 with my friend that basically it doesn't really make sense to fight the system from within when we were trying to build a more free society in Czech Republic. That after this experience that we had from the political process, we realized that even if we won the majority in that political system, there was very little we could change because there are so many interests that are already built into the society, and people are actually demanding the welfare state, high taxation in a way, and all the bureaucracy that comes with it. And at some point we realized there is probably 1% of the people around the world that actually want to live in a free society that really has a demand to build something new from scratch. And at the time we started looking for options. What can we do? How can we start a new country based on these principles, especially the principles of voluntary taxes? And we found many places which could be used, but at some point my friend Jiří actually sent me a link to a beautiful place between Croatia and Serbia that was unclaimed by any country for more than 28 years. And as you might know, the territory is one of the preconditions for establishing a country. So there are these Montevideo criteria which when you start your own country would need to fulfill. And the territory is probably the toughest one, as the world has been basically claimed by many different actors, many different countries by now. And it also, feels kind of interesting when you think about it, that, these freest places like Liechtenstein, like Monaco, like Singapore are actually very, very little places at the end. They are surrounded by much bigger countries, but everybody wants to live in there, right? Like Monaco, there is only basically 1 square kilometer or 2.5 square kilometers at the end of the land. For example, Liechtenstein is not much bigger. It's around 100 square kilometers. So these places end up to be very rich just by applying a simple rule. Basically, they were providing better and freer jurisdictions. And at that point, we decided we also want to build our own country, want to be a good example of how other countries could run themselves. And we also felt it's the right time for it because we have the time of the cryptocurrencies, of the decentralization. And we felt that this is exactly the time when something which was never actually done before, building a country from scratch without any bloodshed or without any big conflict, could be done. So we were looking, we found the territory, we decided we're going for it. We built a website where people could sign up. We were expecting that probably 20,000 people will sign up for the citizenship. After we proclaimed the country, I decided to go together with my wife and with my friend and with one journalist. We went to the territory, we stick the flag, and there was enormous interest in Liberland. Right away, I think I received roughly 500,000 emails, which was impossible to reply to. We were barely managed to reply to the journalist in those early months of Liberland. And we also received probably 500,000 applications for the citizenship at the time. And we didn't even have a proper application process. It took us almost 2 weeks to build that. And right after that, we received some 250,000 applications for citizenship through the regular process. It was amazing. There was this huge push by the world media, which happened right after the creation of Liberland. All the big press agencies, including the CNN, Russia Today, have informed about the creation of Liberland. And we were kind of lucky in a sense that the media really at the time fully supported that no matter what the ideology behind the country was, the fact that we have found a piece of no man's land in Europe was a very interesting fact for them. So I started to gather the team of people to build Liberland with me. And of course, it's not easy to build a society from scratch. So in the last 5 years, almost 6 years now, we have put together a very strong team of people. And that's another point which is very important when you start your own country. You actually need to have diplomacy with other countries. That means you have to have people that are able to open up these diplomatic channels. And I'm happy that, for example, our Secretary of State is also representative of British Queen. So it opens us a lot of doors into the world of diplomacy. And I'm happy that we actually we started with recognition of country like Somaliland 2.5 years ago when we visited them, which also has a very interesting status. It's a story of its own. So that was our first bigger step in diplomacy. We got now a couple more countries to follow up on the recognition process, which is very exciting. But I think the most exciting thing about this is the network of those people like, for example, we have here in Guatemala that are forming the representative offices. And right now I'm on the travel here in Central America. I'm looking for all these beautiful places which are either starting under the diaspora kind of movement of Liberland, and there are different villages that are being built here, or there are simply representative offices pushing the recognition of Liberland forward. And even here in Guatemala, there are many hundreds of people that apply for citizenship, and we're trying to help them to get through the process and become citizens at the end. So that's another thing you need to have. You need to have a population. You actually need to have quite a lot of people that support your cause. And many people have tried to start a country in past. For example, the Onassis family has put enormous energy into starting a new country. For example, Donald Trump was also thinking about starting his own country before he ran for the president of the United States. But it's not that simple. You actually need to have a nation. That means you need to have a group of people which act as a nation, right? And that's the duck test, the country duck test, the nation duck test. If it walks like a duck, if it makes sounds like a duck, then it's a duck. And Liberland does have a great society of all these people around the world that are forming companies, they are forming cultural events. They have recently formed university. That's why I'm also excited to be here at the Francisco Marroquin University, and I hope there will be a strong partnership between the Free University of Liberland and the Francisco Marroquin University. So when you have that kind of group of people that have a strong attachment to the piece of territory, then you are fulfilling yet another criteria that is very important part of the country building process. So you have to have a territory, you have to have a government, you have to have a population, and all these factors basically come together. The biggest issue that we are struggling with right now in Liberland, but to be honest, it's not the biggest issue really, but let's say it's the biggest technical issue is the access to the territory right now. With Liberland, uh, it has been formed on the territory which was not claimed by Croatia or Serbia. Yet Croatia, basically from the 14th day of its existence, when we started the country, started to block the access to this territory. They haven't started to claim the territory, yet they have prevented anybody from accessing it. And from our perspective, it's not that bad because it is actually a kind of a security for the territory itself. So if somebody else wanted to come inside of Liberland and start a new country there, he would be deterred by the Croatian police. But from our perspective, of course, it makes us a couple problems with the development of the country itself. But on the other hand, it's not the most important part of the puzzle. And there is this Chicago Journal of International Law and Michigan Journal of International Law, actually, that go deeply into this topic. The fact that Croatia doesn't claim this territory and at the same time they are by force preventing people from settling it makes Liberland a legally functional entity according to the international law. That doesn't mean that when we don't fully fulfill that criteria, that we are not a country, right? And right now, actually, I'm right from Latin America. I'm heading back to Liberland to celebrate the 6th anniversary of Liberland. We will be on the boats next to Liberland. We are actually building a permanent settlement right on the shores of Liberland, ready to be able to settle that piece of land. And it's kind of crazy when you imagine that there is 600,000 Liberlanders, there is a couple million Croatians. This piece of land, it has never been used by anybody for any bigger economical activity. It has actually been unclaimed, or it was left alone by Serbia and never accepted into the territory of Croatia. And the thing that we want to do there is something I would say fantastic, in a sense that we want to experiment with how far we can get with the level of the human freedom. And we know very well that the more freedom people have and the less power the government has, the more prosperous the society it creates. We know also that it's important to have the rule of law, the system in which, of course, the criminal elements of the society are somehow taken care of. And that's why, by the way, those are the main things that Liberland is taking care of. Those are the fundamentals of our constitution. We only want to take care of security inside of the territory, justice, and foreign affairs, and leave the rest to the free market. Liberland is actually completely forbidden to organize, for example, education. The fact that there is this Free University of Liberland doesn't come from any law or from any state interference. Liberland is also forbidden to organize the medical system. We really believe that the private sector is better in organizing the medical system. And we are, unlike, for example, other countries, are not going to try to monopolize the market of vaccines or prevent people from selling respirators, etc. And I really believe that Liberland would be a good example how this crazy pandemic that the world is going through would be handled in Liberland. So when you have all these things put together, and I think that that's very much relevant to the 21st century, the big thing that you need is a full transparency. And this is the biggest project that we are taking on right now. We are building a blockchain governance based on the latest blockchain technology. And I probably many of you are already big supporters of Bitcoin. Liberland has received a lot of publicity recently for being the first sovereign country to adopt Bitcoin as a reserve currency or as a national currency. But we have this whole new world of decentralized systems. And I mean, Ethereum is probably a good example, but now there is this proof of stake mechanisms, which is very relevant to the way that the national governments are working and how they're built. And we have decided to work with the Polkadot open source system with their substrate, that's how it's called, to put together our constitution on blockchain. Meaning we want to put all of these services that I've mentioned actually on a blockchain in a completely transparent way. Some countries are talking about implementing blockchain on, for example, the land registry or in medical sector. But we are not that much interested in that. We are actually interested in applying a completely transparent and super efficient system of governance directly to the running of the country itself. That means the budget will be on blockchain, the Congress will be on blockchain. That means all the resolutions by the justice, by the courts will be on blockchain, and we really want to build a system of decentralized courts. All the companies that are currently in Liberland will also move to blockchain, and they will be able to issue shares on Liberland blockchain. And because this Polkadot ecosystem is really, I would say, well developing, we would be also able to keep the privacy of these companies at the same time as running them with a high fidelity in terms of, for example, keeping the shares, etc. So I would say this is actually one of the biggest elements that can be a big, I would say, game changer in the whole development of Liberland. As you have seen, Bitcoin has become the third biggest currency at the same level like the Japanese yuan, a little bit smaller than the American dollar by now, or 2 times smaller. So it has become a major player itself. And now all these other ecosystems have grown to the size of other countries, the Polkadot or Ethereum. It's amazing how huge, I would say, interest they have brought. And now what we are doing, we're combining this world of cryptocurrency with the world of building a very free society on a piece of land where I think the freedom is very much needed. And we have this economic study where it was put together by Libec, and I hope many other reputable institutions will follow in supporting the case for Liberland. But this study argues that Liberland could help also both countries, Croatia and Serbia, and probably the whole Balkans by a huge number. And when I say that, we're talking. So this economic study, which was put together by Libec, argues that the amount of economic energy that we could add to the whole region equals to almost 1% of GDP a year. And it's not just, of course, Liberland. You can see that Hong Kong has boosted the whole development of China and inspired a great growth, basically transformed a whole China into small free zones and very free areas, which in turn turned the whole China into I would say, seriously a big superpower, economic superpower, which has recently outpaced even the US economy. So what Liberland is hoping to do is also to inspire the good old Europe to turn itself in a freer direction, to inspire and lower the taxes and deregulate. That is actually the mission of Liberland. We want to make sure that we run Liberland as a good example, but we will also boost the economy of other countries indirectly by bringing a lot of economic interest from around the world. And there are a couple very interesting things about this in regards to the development, physical development of Liberland itself. We do have more than 1,200 architects that applied for citizenship of Liberland as well. And one of them was also Patrick Schumacher, the director of Zaha Hadid, one of the most renowned architectural studios. They have recently finished the Beijing airport, for example, and they have beautiful buildings all around the world. And with his support, we are running an architectural competition that will gather the interest, and it already gathered interest of more than 80 different architectural teams. And we are actually going to show how Liberland itself will be developed. But there is one more cherry on the top to that story, that the whole thing is actually going to happen on a virtual reality platform. So visitors or investors or citizens will be able to interact in that virtual reality space that will be created to present all these great architectural plans created by the architectural community. So I would say, there are huge opportunities which Liberland can bring to the whole region. We just need to be able to sell it better to our neighbors. And we have been, I would say, quite successful in selling the idea in Serbia. Serbia stated at the very beginning they don't mind creation of Liberland on this territory. I would say we have also received a nice support by the Minister of Economy of Vojvodina, which is the sovereign or autonomous region inside of Serbia. And we have actually opened up a free trade zone together last year, which allows Liberland companies to be able to trade already through this free trade zone without any customs or taxes, which might be an interesting thing for you if you want to be more economically active in Europe. Then with Liberland company and with Liberland e-residency program, you are able to actually enter that market and enjoy also great logistics that is being put together by that logistics center that is being built there. So we do have that over there. We are also building a small Liberland village in Serbia that will be a small scale Liberland in a sense that it will be manifested in physical reality. We are building a floating Liberland also next to Liberland. And by the way, there are beautiful beaches inside of Liberland and around Liberland. So if you're coming to join us, for example, for the anniversary on the 13th of April, or if you're coming to join us on the 13th of August for the Floating Man Festival, you will be able to enjoy a beautiful nature and a great community of people, of early Bitcoin adopters, of great thinkers, professors even from this university are coming to join us for these two events. So that's what I'm talking about, having a vibrant community that is building Liberland and pushing it forward. I would conclude basically by saying that I hope Liberland does inspire other people to build their communities, build their even countries, become basically from the crazy world that we are living in many ways, become independent, push yourselves to adopt the cryptocurrencies if you haven't done that, because that really helps you to become a free in this crazy world which is dominated by regulation, by taxation, by enormous amount of pressure now being put through, for example, pandemics. And of course, join us and become Liberlander as well, because the more citizenships you have, the better. It is a fairly easy process. It takes a couple of minutes. And right now we have also started a regular passport program very recently. So it is a procedure which only takes a couple of minutes, and we will be very happy to have you on board and introduce you to our local representatives, help you to find your place in our community. And I believe it can be also a great benefit to people that are able to operate their businesses in Liberland and find new friends and find new, we had many marriages already as well in Liberland. So thank you very much again for giving me the space to present. And I'm more than happy to jump into the question and answer session.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to invite those who are watching us to send your questions either through Facebook or through YouTube. And Mr. President will be very happy to answer. There is one from Facebook here. It is, what is the most challenging objection to Liberland that you have heard or read?
I would say it is the fact that we're breaking the paradigm, that there is this kind of status quo that countries kind of have to be built through some sort of conflict, and that's the fun part, where Liberland has not been formed on anybody else's territory. We actually don't have any conflict. Our plan is totally in line with Croatians' version of the border, right? Yet Croatia is actually the one that is obstructing our development but we are actually on the side of Croatia's version of the border, in which Liberland is not part of the Croatia in this border dispute. So that's one fact, and of course the fact that we are building a tax haven or tax heaven, it's also somehow a big problem for many politicians. You know, some people like the tax hells more than tax heavens, but I think it is one of those things. It's very difficult to fight a positive project. In a sense, we're building something and they're trying to uh, kind of tear it down, right? But we're here. You know, it's like Bitcoin. The more you fight it, the more attention it gets and bigger it grows. And that's probably one of the things which really, is helping Liberland as well, right? The more attention we received in the fight, it's form of recognition. If you open up that brochure that is very recently now published on Liberland, and you can see all the hundreds of representatives and the members of government and all the projects that we are developing, it actually starts with the quote by the foreign minister of Croatia, that the Liberland has the Liberland idea has already grown too big, and it's form of recognition, right? When the foreign minister of Croatia starts to worry about the growth of Liberland, it is a recognition in itself. And if for example, Czech ministry warns about the activities of Liberland, and it's again the foreign ministry, they never talk about private individuals. They are the foreign ministry. They only deal with countries, right? So whenever we actually get on the level when the foreign ministries start to deal with the issue, we are becoming recognized one way or another by other states, even though it might not be in the positive way, right? But still, it's a form of recognition.
It's a process.
It's a process.
This is a question from Darren Orbo. Thank you. And it is, what do you need to get citizenship of Liberland?
Well, right now, we basically start with this e-residency process. We get to know you, make sure that you're not a terrorist or a criminal, which, I think it's good to know when you're building a new society that you don't have malicious actors coming in. And it takes a couple of days. We just tried it. We had a shipment coming from our office in Guatemala. It takes 4 days to deliver. It's amazing. I was surprised that it's so fast. So you get your e-residency card. And from that on, you actually get to have an interview with our representative, and we figure out how you can best fit into the community, and we figure out the best path for citizenship. And right now, there is this kind of unwritten rule that people usually have to collect 5,000 merits through their activity or through voluntary taxes or through other means to become citizens. And usually, if people stick with us and help us to push things forward for a year or so, they become citizen as well.
I have another question here. Have you faced issues with citizens of Liberland who do not fully understand the principles and want to change them?
Well, I think that's a really good question. But that's also like we libertarians are usually complete minority, right? And we are kind of hard-headed in the way we think about. But funnily enough, if you start to live in libertarian society, even you are not completely, I would say, ideologically on that. You still go with the flow, right? That's the fun part, where it's much easier to push different things, even though there could be some people that don't understand exactly. They're actually going with the flow, and that problem doesn't really exist so far. And there is another important issue which I haven't mentioned, and those are the principles of our constitution. So they're very hard coded. It's difficult to change the constitution. Like, it would be really a pain for legislative process to, for example, install a new taxes. It would be like somebody would have to basically take over all the institutions in Liberland to be able to do that. And the only tax, by the way, which is kind of allowed in the future is the property tax, meaning the land tax, actually, because that was something we were thinking that it could be good to have in order to optimize the way the land is utilized, so nobody buys it just for investment for the future, and it does have to produce some economic activity. But a part of that, all the taxes are actually forbidden by the Constitution, and it would take a public veto to overcome. It would take the veto of Senate. It would take a 3/4 of the Congress to vote for. So all these principles that Liberland is built on are actually guarded by many other institutions that are securing that it would be difficult to change it, even though there will be majority of people that would like to change it.
Thank you. This question is kind of related to the one that you answered before, but I will ask it because you may want to share details. Andrea Martinez de Alvarado asks, would you ask for criminal records to any person that wants citizenship, as other countries do?
Well, we do ask for that. We don't ask for the proof. We actually just we ask for it in the questionnaire from beginning. And I've got a couple funny stories about that. It's, for example, prevented Roger Ver, one of our, I would say, major supporter, to apply for citizenship because he was worried he was selling some fireworks in the United States. But of course, if it's not a serious crime, it's not a problem. If it's like possession of marijuana or something like that, it's not a deal breaker. So we ask for that, and we also then check independently if that person is not on some sort of wanted list, because that also happened to us already, right? Like we have people that are kind of trying to get a second citizenship just because they're going to jail for some serious criminal offense, and it also happened to us already, and we were able to prevent that person from getting the Liberland documents to able to. So. Yes, we do check, and I think it's healthy to, when you're building a society like this, we're not building a Monero, right? We're building a trust, a society based on trust, and when you meet other Liberlander, we should be quite sure that he is not going to mess with your money or with your business.
This is a question by Adriana Peralta. It is, why build a country from scratch? Why not negotiate a land like Hong Kong did?
Well, if you know the history of Hong Kong, there was a big backing by the United Kingdom, right? And it's not that easy. I mean, it apparently is much easier to build a country from scratch than to try to change existing country, first of all, right? That's a difficult one because you have to change the minds of the people. And it is very difficult to buy a piece of sovereign land. It has become almost impossible. And again, like people like Onassis family tried it. They have been traveling and talking with all these dictators and small Pacific islands, and they were trying to buy a piece of land with sovereignty, because there is also a strong backlash against the entities that would allow this to happen, right? Like there would be this diplomatic community that would push these countries that would start doing this. I am very positive about the creation of the free trade zones and the ZD zones, for example, right now in Honduras. I think it's extremely positive development in the change of the mindset of the existing powers that be, that these things are happening, and we know very well that now there are these, like for example, Free Private Cities initiative, which I'm a big supporter of, which are traveling around the world and looking for countries that are willing to implement a freer jurisdictions inside of their own jurisdictions, yet under the control. There is this experiment now in Saudi Arabia as well, which has not developed very well so far, but I hope it's going to do better. There are these African countries that are experimenting with building small Dubais inside of their jurisdictions. So yes, I'm a great supporter of that, but we have went a different path. We decided we're not going to ask or negotiate with anybody. We're just doing our own thing, and I think that's the way you build a sovereign country.
This is a question from Angel Chamo. Mr. President, is the future of governance private, according to your experience?
Well, this is a good question, right? Like the way we basically give back to the taxpayers is that by giving them merits, and merits are literally, and it's a part of the Liberland, right? Like people are becoming shareholders of the state itself, and I think that's a way to go. Like the more taxes you pay, the bigger your share in the society will be, the bigger your say is in the society. And it's interesting to see that some countries actually went vice versa, like Panama was kind of a private entity and become a republic later on. But I really believe there is especially now with all these blockchain governances and these proof of stake uh, blockchains that are very successful, there is now this time when the countries itself could be kind of tokenized and governed in a very kind of corporate way in a way, but still having all these elements of the state at the same time.
Thank you. There's another question here. This is from Leslie Daniela Gramajo. Thank you. Mr. President, what would you like Liberland to accomplish? How will it change the future, in your opinion?
Well, let me just quote my favorite quote from Lord Acton: "The power corrupts, and the ultimate power corrupts ultimately." Right? That's a very famous quote, and I really believe that's a great argument against the centralization of power. It's a great argument against the global government, and we could see a huge push for that, right? Like there are these big players that are unified in the global government. And I think Liberland is basically the kind of the contra-push to that, right? Like we believe that people should be able to govern themselves, and by that you're as a person or as a nation are self-determined. You have the right for your self-governance, and there is this contra thing, which is this kind of the territorial integrity of the countries, which are still in constant conflict. But I really believe this self-determination that has been built into the Charter of UN has not been really fully enjoyed and pushed forward by the people of the world. And there have been like forces that are tied to these public shares, and I don't think people will be turning around. I believe that as long as jurisdiction creation right now, again, it's a great opportunity for ecosystems that are becoming more powerful than the had a single fight with anybody while they were created, right? They just created enormous value in a very short period of time. We will see that this will also turn into the kind of the nation creation in itself, because these newly created blockchains will actually become sovereign jurisdiction in themselves, first in a virtual reality, but maybe later on Mars. Maybe the masks of the future will be creating these the jurisdictions, or maybe also inside of the existing jurisdictions now on this planet. And I hope that these newly created virtual countries will be able to negotiate with the existing countries. And of course, the more countries, the better in a way, right? The more options you have to escape. If one country goes completely nuts, closes everything, puts everybody under lockdown, you always have a chance to jump to another jurisdiction. Or if other country goes nuts and installs 100% taxes, you always can jump. So the more jurisdictions there are, the more options for you are there on this planet to live free.
But governments hate when the people abandon them.
I mean, voting with your feet, of course, is one of the strongest vote that you can have. And again, there is this huge push for kind of centralization of power, but also there is this now huge push against the centralization power, especially from the crypto world, and from the fact that all this huge value is being created now in these completely decentralized systems, which will again burst back to the real physical reality.
Any feedback from the people from Silicon Valley and these big companies like Facebook, Amazon, and
I mean, there was this great time when Facebook, when Liberland started, and we had all these hundreds of thousands of people joining on the Facebook page, gave me the godlike feature to be able to manage everything that had Liberland in the name. And I was thinking, is it something that they gave me? They give everybody who becomes popular, or they gave me because they want me to help to sort out the great interest that was there, right? And everything that had Liberland in the name, I could like literally delete or edit, no matter who created it at the time. And there was this 14 days. And then they decided my personal page has become too popular. I received like 30,000 friendship requests, so they turned the friendship requests into likes, and they deleted my personal profile. So I recently actually met the representative that is responsible from Google for relations with other governments. So I hope there will be some interesting talks with that. Of course, they're a bit conservative, these big Silicon Valley giants, but I also think we will attract them sooner or later because Liberland really wants to be the most privileged jurisdictions for any kind of business.
This is another question from Diana Peralta. What type of constitutionalism are you? Can you tell us more about the constitutional process?
Well, the Constitution has been drafted almost immediately after the creation of Liberland. I was a bit reluctant to go and start a country without a constitution, but right after we started it, we had this great constitutional lawyer, Kasper Zayats, who basically sit down and wrote it. And he was a Liberlander and libertarian by heart, and I think he did a great job on putting together a new form of Republican constitution based on principles coming from the U.S. Constitution. And by the way, that's why we started the country on 13th of April. It was the birthday of Thomas Jefferson. We really wanted to invoke the spirit of American Revolution. And also some principles of Swiss democracy and also some meritocracy. So all these things were incorporated. And I still think it's a great job. Right now we are doing some changes with this internal group of people, especially people from the government and a couple other constitutional lawyers, changing it so it is compatible with the blockchain governance that we want to put it in. So I want the written constitution to be there. But at the end, everything's going to be hard-coded into the smart contracts that will be running on the blockchain run by Liberland citizens. So, you could kind of quarrel about some of the things, but at the end, it will be the blockchain that will be guarding many of the elements that normally they could disregard them, but because they will be hard-coded into blockchain, it will be impossible. So I think we really combine the best elements of the existing constitutions. For example, from the Swiss democracy, we have this public veto. The citizens don't have an active vote to push something through. Actually, they do have in Switzerland, but it is not really working very well. But we are giving the citizens the right to get rid of any decision that the government puts on the table. And I think that's a very important part of the democracy.
This is related to this recent question. Does this country building idea collides with Hayek's principle of spontaneous order?
I think that's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, this is kind of a spontaneous order activity as well, right? And of course, we are not building an anarchic society, right? We are building a minarchistic society, and we want to experiment with putting private sector even in these areas. It's difficult to put for example, completely privatize the diplomacy, but you can privatize the police. You can build a Uber app where everybody with some sort of qualification will be able to join and provide a security on the Liberland, inside of Liberland. That's fairly easy. You can decentralize the courts and privatize them and invite the competition. And that's where we want to really go. So these two topics, and about diplomacy, I'm still not sure how to privatize it. Somehow there has to be this kind of central entity somehow managing the diplomatic relations with other countries. But we will probably come up with something as well. But I think that for the viewers, this could be a really interesting thing, because even the minarchistic things that are inside of Liberland that Iran was arguing for, and that I don't know, Mary Rothbard was against, and they wanted to private. We are actually starting from minarchistic society and are thinking how to bring in competition into them actually by principle.
We have two more questions, probably three, and the next 12 minutes.
Okay.
To have a general idea. This is a question from YouTube. It's considering Liberland is such a small territory, is there a limited number of people who can apply to become citizens?
Yes, actually it is, because we have limited number of merits. That's because the merits are connected to the land itself. And if you divide that number, which we are now considering to be 70 million, that means There will be 10 merits per square meter. Then if one citizenship is 5,000 merits, right, then you have roughly 14,000 people that can become citizens under that number.
Andrea Martinez de Alvarado asks, if someone calls for sedition, would it be penalized in Liberland?
Well, I really recommend this book by Prince Hans Adam, which argues, and in Liechtenstein they have this, that any kind of village inside of Liechtenstein can declare an independent country. By the way, I went there and just was interested how that works, but I found out the debate has never ever started because Liechtenstein is really providing good services for a good price. We don't have that built in our constitution, but it's actually a doable thing, right? Like Liberland is really small, so dividing it into sub-countries is a bit of would be like a kind of a technical challenge, and it's something we can still add. I will look into it. I promise I will look into the book that Prince Hans Adam has written and try to include some of his ideas about this into the constitution as well, and try to push it with our committee. It's a great book, by the way, The State for the 21st Millennia by Prince Hans Adam, the Prince of Liechtenstein.
Okay. Got another question here. Is there any list of priorities for Liberland currently? What does Liberland needs as a list of
I would
priorities?
say right now the biggest priority is to finish the constitution. It is and build this blockchain ecosystem. So that's priority number one. Second priority is to be very strongly present in the territory or around the territory. So that's why we have this floating man festival. We have this floating Liberland concept of boats around Liberland. We have this village. We have these also diaspora villages around the world. So Liberlanders are actually physically visible and they're active. And also the free trade zone is an important part of that. Like you can see the Liberland business is actually operating from very close from Liberland, and I don't know, selling goods to all around the world. So that's a very important part. If you are somebody who just doesn't like it in their country, I can tell you that right now the community is really growing. Around Liberland is growing and the businesses are growing. So you can actually relocate there and start your business and enjoy this free trade zone ecosystem, for example. And the third thing is, of course, the recognitions. I would say to get more kind of acceptable by the community and by other states is an important part of the process that we are going through. And I'm very happy that we are actually quite successful. We have been much more successful than any similar project in past.
Well, Mr. President, I am sure that we have learned a lot about how to build a country without breaking the principle of non-aggression, also based on freedom and the rule of law. So thank you, Mr. President. We wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Luis. It's always great to be here, and I hope we will come up with some great ways how to collaborate on some of the projects, especially on the university level.
Right?
Thank you very much.
Hoy, el mundo busca cursos en línea. Hoy, el mundo sigue las tendencias del mercado. Hoy, el mundo necesita emprendedores. Hoy más que nunca, el conocimiento se dispersó y la Universidad Francisco Marroquín no cerró. Se multiplicó en diversos hogares.